Welcome back to the Terry and Jesse Show. Jesse's out today, but we have Father Robert Spitzer joining us. Father, thank you for taking the time to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with our listeners.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Terry. Glad to be with you.
Well, I'm excited. Father, you know, I've been around the block a few years, and I've seen you at different events or family conferences, every different things that you have shared, even business conferences where you just show Catholic teachings for morality. You're one of the most knowledgeable Catholic priests I know, and believe me, many of them who formed me, Father Ken Baker, Father Joe Fessio, Father Robert Spitzer, you know what? They're all Jesuits.
Yeah, they sure are, and good buddies of mine, too.
Birds of the feather flocking together.
Yes, we are.
Well, Father, I wanted to talk about this show that you have, a new book, also the Father Spitzer's Universe, exploring life's big questions. But you know what? I'm going to throw you a curveball, because I'm good at throwing curveballs, and I know, in baseball analogy, when you were a kid, no problem, I'd hit a curveball. So here's the curveball. Last week, I was on a secular website, and they were talking about life after death.
Yeah.
And I went, well, that's interesting. This reminds me of Father Spitzer's stories.
Yeah.
And this was talking about scientists who put these probes on people's brains, and they wanted to see what happens. These were people who were dying of whatever disease. They knew they were in the process of dying, but they were curious. They wanted to see if any brain waves or anything that would happen at the time of the death. And I know you know what happened, but I wanted you to, what I want to tell our listeners, but this secular article said, you know, this is actually supporting the idea that there's a soul in that body, and at the time of the death, something leaves the body.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
That seems to be the case, and it's if you've ever been like a hospital chaplain, and that was my very first assignment when I was just ordained.
Sure.
Sometimes you can actually feel that spirit or soul going sometimes right through you. At the moment of death, or you feel something, almost like not quite electrical, like a shock coming out of an outlet, but something equivalent to it actually occurring. And so it's very interesting, to sort of see, maybe there really is something. Now, of course, some secularists could say, oh, that's just a discharge of energy of some sort or another. But, what's interesting is when you feel it going through you, you almost sense that the energy has a personality, personhood to it. And so it does give you a sense that there's something there. But the near-death experience studies are
I love them.
Oh, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. And I don't have to tell anybody, the New York Academy of Sciences, in their 2022 annals, says in one of the articles, there's a real credible possibility that your consciousness is going to survive bodily death. And that's on the basis of a whole lot of peer-reviewed articles.
Incredible.
And so, it's peer-reviewed studies. It's amazing.
I had to start off with that because I find that so confirming in the sense of, as a Catholic, what we believe about life and death and salvation and all this. So now I'm going to cover some other questions that are going to change gears, but I just wanted to set that up because I find that just fascinating and so interesting for us as Catholics. Father, you have a science background, obviously, but is there really an intelligent being who created the universe? In other words, I want to understand, and I've heard you say this, and this is, what's the Catholic position of saying it, to say there really could be an intelligent being, that it supports what we've always said, an all-knowing God who started no beginning, no end? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the debate for a long time kind of went back and forth because we have what's called fine-tuning coincidences, tuning for life in our universe.
Yeah.
So there are a variety of what we call initial conditions and constants that are free parameters. In other words, these constants are not determined by our laws of physics.
Okay.
That means they could have been anything.
Yeah.
The speed of light could have been higher or lower than it currently is, right? Or, we have lots of constants. The mass of the proton could have been higher. mass of the electron, electromagnetic charge, the strong nuclear force coupling constant could have been higher or lower, right? The Planck constant could have been higher or lower. The cosmological constant could have been, it's fine tuned to within 1 part in 10 to the 120th.
Incredible.
Trillion, 10 trillions together, right? It's literally, it's fine tuned to 1 part in 10 to the trillion. So if you're off by 1 trillion, then our universe could never have sustained a life form.
Incredible.
Yeah,
that tells us even the circulation of the planets, everything. If it's off just a little, it doesn't work. What does that tell you about somebody having a design?
Well, for the longest time, people thought, well, the universe could be infinite in extent. And this was the Aristotelian thought. But then, of course, Father Georges Lemaitre, way back in 1927, made the initial discovery of what's called today the Big Bang Theory, which is the most rigorously established cosmological theory we have. In 1927, he made this discovery that if you applied the general theory of relativity to what we see in what's called the radial velocities of extragalactic nebulae, it looks pretty certain that the further a galaxy is away from us, the faster its velocity moving away from us.
Oh my gosh.
So you get, what's the only way of explaining it? Well, for a long time, people thought there must be some mistake here. But Lemaitre said, no. If you take the equations of the general theory of relativity, you can explain all of it by merely assuming that the universe started off as one little cosmic atom, is what he called it, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters in diameter, and, very highly dense, right? Like super dense mass energy. But that one little 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, boom, it begins to expand, and it expands very rapidly. Now, he didn't know about inflationary theory yet, but the main thing, though, is he did know that if the universe were to expand, and getting to a point of uniform expansion, then yes, the further a galaxy is away from our galaxy, the greater the velocity it will be moving away from us. And he explains it perfectly. And of course, at that time, this is Father Lemaitre, right? This is a Catholic priest. He's got a couple of doctorates from MIT, but he's a real smart guy.
Yeah, you think?
Basically says, we by the way, we have Lemaitre constant, the Lemaitre equations, the Lemaitre Walker space-time. Lemaitre is everywhere that we look around. But anyway, he presented it to Einstein. And he walked right up to Einstein and said, I got the explanation using your general theory. And Einstein said, well, the mathematics is great, but the physics is preposterous. Imagine, a universe expanding instead of in a static state. Well, after Edwin Hubble, in 1929, did the big, survey of the heavens and looked at what's called the red shifting of the galaxies that were further away from, and proved that, the Lemaitre equations were correct. He adjusted Lemaitre's constant a little bit. Today it's called the Lemaitre Hubble constant. It used to be called the Hubble constant. But in any case, that Lemaitre Hubble constant, we now have a very exact figure for it. Lemaitre was right on the marker, and Einstein turned around to Lemaitre after looking at the data. He went to Mount Wilson, and of course he says, this is the most satisfying explanation of creation that I have ever heard. So, vindication for the Catholic priest.
Yes. Wow. Father, I think of, when I hear these kinds of things, I think of the great love that God has for us. And even individually, I remember as a child being told that if God stopped thinking about you, Terry Barber, you'd cease to exist.
That's true.
I know, but it's profound.
Yeah.
It's profound. Now, here's the next question that kind of ties into that.
Sure.
If so, what does this mean for each individual person and the existence of the eternal soul?
Well, in terms of, the eternal soul, well,
yes.
The soul can't evolve. So if we're talking, from a starting point of universal evolution, for example, your body can evolve, your brain can evolve. But if we're talking about those near-death experience that we started off with at the beginning here, if that there's very good evidence that you do have a transphysical soul that will survive bodily death. Now, the problem with the transphysical soul is it's transphysical.
Yeah.
It's beyond physical structures and processes. So if it's beyond physical structures and processes, it's not going to be explicable in terms of the evolution of a physical organic process like evolution, right? Mm-hmm. So evolution is powerless to explain how we got a soul.
That's right.
Now, the only thing with Catholics,
Tell me.
Is that Catholics can believe in evolution, mm-hmm. right? Pope Pius XII said that, mm-hmm. and then later John Paul II, right. St. John Paul II, actually also indicated to the Papal Academy of Sciences that this is not just a hypothesis, but a very well validated theory. So he said, of course, we can even believe in the evolution in hominins. So between the time of Homo erectus to Homo sapiens sapiens, there was an evolution of our cerebral cortex, which is very profound. No problem. But that doesn't explain our abstract capacity, our religious capacity, our capacity for the transcendental, our capacity for triadic language, our capacity for, like 15 other things that I talk about in my book there, Father Spitzer's Universe Exploring the Big Questions. So the main thing, though, is when you get to it, the idea is, where did it come from? It's got to come from a transphysical cause.
Of course.
It can't come from a physical cause. It can't come from an evolutionary cause. Right. So therefore, God has to give us this transphysical cause. God is the only one who can give each and every person a unique human transphysical soul. Now, does that correspond with, the data of evolution? Yes. Is that the only restriction, basically, that Pope Pius XII put on our belief in evolution? Yes. In other words, so long as we do not believe in a merely neo-Darwinian materialistic view of evolution, then we can certainly believe in evolution so long as we acknowledge that God alone is the creator of our unique transphysical soul given to each one of us individually, because each soul is unique and it is intended by God. Your soul, my soul, and our uniqueness is intended by God specifically for eternal life in Him. And that soul that we have is a hint. It's a big hint that we are destined for heaven. We were meant to live beyond physical organic processes and structures. We were meant to live in a transphysical domain, namely God's domain, and we were meant to have eternal life in Him. So, there's plenty of evidence for this out there. And so the Catholic view of evolution is very enlightened, which is why most Catholic scientists feel very comfortable being Catholic and scientific.